The single dad joked, "Careful, people will think we're dating, minus I hope they do," she whispered. The first time she said it, nobody else heard, not the customers standing in line, not the elderly woman browsing greeting cards, not even the little girl tugging on her father's sleeve while asking for candy. Only he heard it, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. Mark stood frozen behind the counter of the small bookstore, where he worked 6 days a week, raising his 7-year-old daughter alone while trying to survive the grief that had settled into his chest years earlier. He had only been joking. The woman standing beside him had been helping him organize a display near the front window. They had spent the afternoon laughing about misplaced books and clumsy customers. When an older customer smiled and remarked that they looked like a happy couple, Mark had laughed and casually replied that she should be careful because people would start thinking they were dating. Then, "Sawe si Diane," came the whisper, a quiet, trembling whisper. "I hope they do." The words struck him harder than he could explain. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected love, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Dream Porch Stories for more emotional and inspiring journeys. Mark wasn't a man who expected miracles anymore. Life had taught him otherwise. 5 years earlier, he had been a husband, a father, and a man full of plans. He and his wife Emily had dreamed about buying a larger house, traveling with their daughter Sophie, and growing old together. Then a distracted driver ran a red light. One ordinary afternoon changed everything. Emily never came home. The months that followed felt like drowning. Every morning Mark woke up hoping the nightmare would end, only to remember it was real. He learned how to braid Sophie's hair by watching online videos. He learned how to comfort a child who cried herself to sleep asking for her mother. He learned how to smile while breaking apart inside. People praised him for being strong. They didn't see the nights, the silence, the loneliness, the empty side of the bed, the family photographs that felt like painful reminders of a life that no longer existed. Years passed, Sophie grew older. Mark survived. But surviving wasn't the same as living. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a woman walked into the bookstore. Her name was Hannah. At first, she seemed like any other customer. She visited regularly, spending hours reading near the back corner. She bought novels, poetry collections, and children's books. She remembered people's names and always smiled at Sophie. There was something different about her, something warm, something genuine. She never pushed herself into Mark's life. She simply appeared in it, little by little, page by page, conversation by conversation. Months later, when the bookstore owner needed temporary help, Hannah volunteered. That was when everything changed. Mark discovered she was funny, the kind of funny that arrived unexpectedly and made stressful days easier. He discovered she was patient, especially with Sophie. Most importantly, he discovered she understood sadness, not because she talked about it, because she carried it. Sometimes he caught her staring out windows with distant eyes. Sometimes she looked at old photographs on her phone and quickly put them away. She never explained. Neither did he. Two wounded people quietly recognizing familiar pain. One afternoon, Sophie sat beside Hannah during story time and wrapped her tiny arms around her waist. The gesture lasted only seconds, but Hannah looked as if her heart had stopped. When Sophie ran off moments later, Mark noticed tears in Hannah's eyes. She quickly turned away. He pretended not to notice. That evening, after closing the bookstore, Hannah finally shared her story. 3 years earlier, she had lost her fiancé to a sudden illness. They had spent nearly a decade together. They had planned a wedding, a future, a family. Then life took him away before any of those dreams could happen. Since then, she had spent years convincing herself she would never love again, never risk her heart again. Mark listened quietly, because for the first time in years, he wasn't the only person carrying grief. Someone understood. Not theoretically. Personally, the friendship deepened, week by week, month by month. Hannah became part of their routine. She attended Sophie's school recital, helped decorate the bookstore for holidays, joined them for occasional dinners. Somewhere along the way, laughter returned to Mark's life. Real laughter, not the forced version he showed the world. The dangerous thing about healing is that sometimes you don't realize it's happening until your heart begins wanting things again. Mark started looking forward to seeing Hannah, started noticing small details. The way she tucked loose hair behind her ear when concentrating. The way she always carried extra tissues for children. The way she spoke kindly to strangers. And that terrified him, because wanting meant risking, loving meant losing. He had already lost everything once. He wasn't sure he could survive it again, so he buried those feelings, ignored them. Pretended friendship was enough. Months passed, then came the bookstore fundraiser. The event brought hundreds of visitors. Everyone worked together to prepare. During the evening, Mark and Hannah spent hours side by side serving customers. They laughed constantly, smiled naturally, looked happy enough that people noticed, which led to the comment, the harmless joke, the whisper, "I hope they do." Mark couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. Neither could Hannah. For days, the air between them felt different, not uncomfortable, just honest. Eventually, they met at a small park after work. Sophie was playing nearby, while the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. Neither wanted to start the conversation. Both knew it had to happen. Mark admitted the truth first. He cared about Hannah, more than friendship could explain. More than he wanted to admit, more than he had allowed himself to believe. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, from relief. Because she felt the same. Yet happiness wasn't immediate. Fear arrived first. What if they were betraying the people they had lost? What if moving forward meant forgetting? What if loving again somehow diminished the love that came before? Those questions haunted them, especially Mark. One night he sat alone looking through old family photographs. Pictures of Emily, pictures of their wedding, pictures of Sophie as a baby. Guilt twisted inside him. He felt as though he stood between two worlds. One built from memory, one waiting in the future. Then, something unexpected happened. The next morning, Sophie found him staring at the photographs. She sat beside him quietly. Children often understand more than adults realize. After several moments, she pointed toward a picture of her mother and smiled. Then, she said something that changed everything. She told him her mother would want him to be happy. Simple words, childlike words. But they shattered years of fear, because Sophie wasn't losing her mother. Nobody could replace Emily, and Hannah wasn't trying to. Love wasn't replacement. Love was expansion. The heart wasn't choosing one person over another. It was finding room to keep growing. Slowly, Mark accepted that truth. Hannah learned it too. Months later, they officially began dating. The bookstore customers celebrated as if they had been waiting forever. Friends cheered. Sophie's excitement nearly burst through the roof. For the first time in years, their little family felt complete. Not perfect, not free from pain, but complete. The scars remained. The memories remained. The grief remained. Yet joy finally existed alongside them. Years later, on a warm autumn evening, Mark stood beneath strings of golden lights in the bookstore courtyard. Friends and family surrounded them. Sophie stood proudly nearby, no longer a little girl but a confident young teenager. Hannah walked toward him, wearing a simple smile that somehow felt brighter than the lights above. As Mark looked around, he realized something extraordinary. Life had not returned him to the future he originally planned. Instead, it had given him a different future. One he never expected. One built from loss, healing, courage, and second chances. Before we reach the end, if this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with others who still believe hope can appear when we least expect it. And here's a special request. Comment below with the words, "Second." Chances are real if you believe love can find people again, even after heartbreak. As Hannah reached him, Mark remembered that rainy Tuesday when she first walked into the bookstore. Neither of them knew then that two broken hearts were slowly walking toward the same destination. Neither knew healing would arrive disguised as friendship. Neither knew that kindness could become companionship, and companionship could become love. Most importantly, neither knew that the chapters they thought had ended were actually leading to a beautiful new beginning. Sometimes life takes away the story we expected. Sometimes it leaves us standing among ruins, wondering how to continue. But every now and then, when hope seems impossible, someone appears quietly in the middle of our ordinary days. Someone who doesn't erase the past. Someone who doesn't demand perfection. Someone who simply sits beside us long enough for the light to return. And when that happens, we discover something remarkable. The heart can break. The heart can grieve. The heart can carry scars for years. Yet somehow, despite everything, the heart can still love again. And Dante forth, and sometimes that second chance becomes the most beautiful chapter of all. The end.